guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA threatened fining us $200 daily for closing our garage doors. Let me start off by saying, if you ever think about buying a house that is part of an HOA community, my only advice is, don't do it. I think that's common knowledge by now, but wait until you hear the story I have for you today. My HOA tried fining us $200 a day for keeping our garage doors closed. A little backstory for you guys, about 2 months prior to this, they found out that someone was living in one of the residents' garages. This is obviously not allowed in most places, regardless or not if you have an HOA. In this particular case, the family was letting a close family friend live in their garage but failed to list said person as an occupant or notify the HOA. There was a big fuss about it from the HOA, and shortly after this, they started creating crazy rules and fines that we had to oblige to. For example, our cars could not be parked in front of our garage door, or we would be fined $75 every time. Not only that, but the dumbest rule they imposed was that our garage doors had to be open from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day. First of all, most of us work in 8 to 5, which means that our garage doors stayed open for a long period of time. While we lived in a safe neighborhood, I just felt like this was just asking for someone to come in and take what is not theirs. Not only that, but most of us did not have anyone home during the day. So, if some broke in or stole stuff from our garage, we would not even notice until it was too late. I understand that they were trying to prevent the same thing from happening with someone living in the garages again, but this was ridiculous. And if you did not abide by their rules, then you would be charged $200 every day. 7 days a week times 200 equal $1,400 a week just because you did not want your garage door open for the whole world to see. I was not the only one upset about this. As a matter of fact, I would say about 80% of the neighborhood was complaining about this new rule. However, until we figured out a way to prove this could be a privacy issue, I was not sure what else we were supposed to do other than comply with the HOA. And just 2 weeks after this rule was officially being followed, my neighbor had several valuable belongings taken from her garage. This is exactly what we were afraid of in the first place. Although she had security cameras, it was tough to prove who it was. And when my neighbor filed a police report and complained to the HOA, she was told that she should know better than to keep valuable belongings in her garage. What the gel? No, she should not know better. It was her property. What other HOA makes you keep your garage doors open most of the day? If she wanted to put a bathtub in her garage, she should be able to do so without something happening to it because of a dumb HOA rule. And shortly after this, a 9-year-old boy's bike was stolen from the garage. Now, I consider myself to be a pretty tough guy. But it is pretty shitty, when you are in a HOA meeting, and a 9-year-old boy is talking about his bike being stolen with tears in his eyes. And no surprise really, the HOA was hardly any help. So, after the meeting myself and a bunch of other neighbors decided to band together to officially vote out the current HOA president. The day after, we filed several official complaints about the HOA president with the board. And get this? Although we planned to vote in order to get him out of his HOA president position, he actually sent us an email. Mr. President sent everyone in the neighborhood, including the HOA board members, a lengthy email that was him throwing a fit, and saying that we were stepping down because we didn't appreciate his efforts in keeping the neighborhood safe. What? A 9-year-old was missing a bike and another family was missing valuables from her garage. How is this keeping the neighborhood safe? The board members were able to set up a small voting period so that we could vote another HOA president in. The grumpy HOA president ended up moving out the neighborhood, which is really not shocking considering he could not handle the backlash. With the new HOA president, we no longer have to keep our garage doors open. We are still discussing ideas that can prevent illegal living in garages, but the new HOA president listens with open ears, and has so far created a space where we can openly express concerns or opinions. Oh, and she bought that 9-year-old a brand new bike, with her own money. Some HOA presidents are not that bad. The next story is titled, No Security Light Allowed? No problem. Years ago when my wife and I had purchased a home, the builder had told us it might be part of an HOA depending on how many homes they ultimately constructed. We were among the first 5 buyers, so we pretty much had free rein to change what we wanted via permissions from the builders. That those changes would be added to what was turned over to the HOA, and for as long as we lived there, the changes could stay. The one change we did was add a motion security light on the back of our fence, cause my neighbor's kid would smoke weed there and I didn't want to smell it sitting on my patio or when I had the windows open on nice evenings. Well, that went up my neighbor's ass sideways for whatever reason, and she refused to believe her kid would be doing that, even though it didn't point towards any other home, just the grass between my fence and the woods. It kept the kids from smoking weed there without calling the cops on something so foolish and petty. But since it was cleared from the builder, she couldn't do anything. Well, 6 months later we end out with an HOA, and she makes it priority 1 to get the lights. Several other neighbors followed what I did whose homes faced the wooded area, removed. The requirement to get it changed, since they were builder approved, was 80% of the community, so the only votes to keep came from those of us on the back of the property. So we have to remove them, being permanent changes. Not even 3 days later, her kid is again back there smoking weed. The HOA counter to why I had it was to call the police non-emergency number, but that's absolutely stupid to risk fucking some kid's life up cause he wanted to smoke weed, when that's an issue his parents, who remember don't believe he does it, deal with. So now I'm pretty livid. This North American land whale cried to the point I had to remove a cheap and non-disruptive fix. She refused to be a parent and keep her kid from impeding on us, so it's time for me to be petty. The next day after her kid first went back there, I go out, buy a 12-feet section of 4x4, wire, concrete, a large planter and 3 6,000 lumen floodlights and build essentially a mini, portable, stadium light setup, rigged to the motion sensor, so whenever anyone passed by my fence, instead of being a small area immediately behind my house lit up, the sun came out to the woods with one light, giving her home an X-ray. The first time her kid went back there it was glorious. I got a picture of him with his bong in hand before he skirted off so I could show her proof, and it sent her through the roof getting those free X-rays. I showed her the picture and she still didn't care, saying if it goes off again I'll call the police, and I was fine with it, cause I told her they'd see the same picture I'd just shown her. In reality they wouldn't, but Martha the manatee didn't know that, and I didn't expect her to try to call my bluff, which she never did. Just complained to the HOA a lot. In the morning time I'd lay the contraption down so it couldn't be seen, and raise it up after it got dark. About a week after this I get a summons to the HOA meeting that's happening that week, and since it was disciplinary for my contraption, their lawyer was there and they want to hear the case. So I lay everything out from builder to pictures showing how the original light didn't shine any brighter than the one on her porch and couldn't be seen from inside the homes, her vendetta to change the HOA rules to suit what she wanted. 3 of the 5 other neighbors who had to remove their security lights were also there to argue for getting them back when I went. After about 40 minutes the lawyer comes back and pretty much said, well, Mr. and Mrs. Hefe_Brutus, you are right. This isn't a permanent structure so it technically is allowed. But you can't have a light facing her property any longer. In addition, by the 1st of next month you will all be allowed to reinstall your smaller lights, as they did provide a measure of security that benefits the property as a whole. So Martha the manatee was blessed with another week of the sun on a pole and being mad about it. Those of us who lived facing the woods got our lights back, and after reselling the lights I made most of my money back I spent on supplies making that monstrosity. It was absolutely worth spending the few $100s to out-petty a bad parent and insufferable neighbor. The next story is titled, You Need to Follow the Law. Okay, no problem. I live in an apartment block in Europe with about 100 apartments in total. Every year we have an election for what could be compared to an American HOA, where we elect a president and a couple of board members to manage the general expenses and daily maintenance tasks, fixing garage port, cleaning common areas, security cameras. While we do have a rulebook of sorts, nobody in the board has ever been too bothered by neighbors going their own way as long as there is no complaints. I am the president of this HOA as of today, and I have had my fair share of interesting neighbors, but this one takes the cake. He bought a fancy Tesla, which he made an effort to flash around the neighbors, kind of condescending on how useless old cars are, how we live in the past. Thing is, we don't have a charging station in the garage, so he has to go to the gas station to fill up the battery. There was no charger when he came in, so that shouldn't come as a surprise here. But as soon as he got the car, he started pestering the board asking about the EV charger. We need to keep up with the modern times, you know? We repeatedly answered that it is in our plans, and that we would love to get him on board to help us, as he was the main interested person for the task. This should make the process much more efficient. He never responded to the invitation to join and help. There is even a small payment for the board members, and we are slammed with other higher priority tasks that have suddenly popped up. Fire alarm upgrades, changing parts of the sprinklers, so we really cannot use much time in EV charging, although we all agree that we have to get that going. Suddenly, I got a phone call from an electrician reading from the law that we cannot deny a EV charger in the garage, and that he would come the following week at our earliest convenience. I just asked him for some time to read the law and make sure we were on the same page, and in the conversation he slipped the name of the person who had ordered the charger. To no surprise, it was the Tesla man. There are others with EVs in the garage, and we have a fluent communication with them about this matter. They prefer to wait than to work on the case, which is fine by me. So, I reread all the laws in our internal regulations to make sure that we were following everything to the letter. It turns out that the law forces a HOA to facilitate the infrastructure for EV charging, not the stations themselves, as long as there is not a force majeure reason against it, like economical reasons. And our internal regulations state that changing essential infrastructure of the building needs to be done under the approval of the General Assembly, which happens once a year. I talked to our finance manager, and he argued strongly against such an expense without getting a loan to partially finance it, as it would destabilize the economy of the community. With all that, we decided to comply with the regulations fully. We won't decide on any structural changes on the building until the next General Assembly. We need a person dedicated to following the steps of finding providers, comparing offers, and presenting them first to the board and then to the rest of the neighbors. This also includes safety measurements for the upgraded infrastructure. Once we have a budget, we will find bank offers for the loan that we will have to take most likely. We need to hire a lawyer to update the rulebook to account for the use of chargers in the garage. As steps 1 and 3 are dependent on General Assemblies, the process will inevitably be prolonged in time, and we know that neighbors are generally against taking up a loan that will increase their monthly costs. So he will have to fight an uphill battle for being a pain in the butt. The best part of this is that before all this happened, we were considering setting a temporary charging station for everyone, instead of the ideal solution of everyone being free to set their charger on their spot. That would not require a loan, and was planned to be done during 2022. Now, we will have to ask the Assembly if this is an interesting way forward, and abide by the response. I feel bad for the EV owners, because when the Tesla guy invoked the rules the game changed and now they have to wait for all the official process instead of having a temporary, just an okay solution while we got the rest in place. The last story is titled, "Call Me Unprofessional? Okay, good luck finding another instructor." I realized today there are not enough stories on here about teachers and MC, so as a teacher of 2 decades, I decided it was time to write out mine. First and foremost, this is a story about a toxic workplace. This could happen in any business in the world. It just happened to occur in a school. Many moons ago, back in the days of Ebola, my school was having a massive shift in priorities and focus. We were a rural school, so new principal assigned to the building, pupils being redistricted, mass retirements. Several people were being pushed out and run off by the incoming principal. A good number of people quit because of the toxic work environment, but I was not in a position to do so. At the time, I had a unique schedule. I taught mostly dual credit courses to juniors and seniors, but I also taught one course of students with SEN/SPED issues. The dual credit courses required a specific advanced degree as I was essentially teaching college credits in the high school. This detail will become essential later. At my school, we would be assigned support teachers to give additional help to students with SEN/SPED services. That support was not allowed to teach, but would typically share a classroom with the content teacher. I was usually unconcerned with who my assigned support was, as I'm a laid-back person who can work with just about anyone and I don't care about sharing a classroom. But there was one male support teacher who was not allowed in my room or near me in the hall. Ever. For the sake of this story, we'll refer to him as Harass. If ever a man knew how close he could get to sexual harassment without crossing the line, it was him. Heck, sometimes he even did cross the line. I made dozens of complaints, but nothing was ever done as I wasn't the target of his comments. He was very religious, carrying on all the time about how a woman's place was at home, so the school was clearly filled with loose women. He made this comment in the hall during transition. He also believed that if a woman was ever elected president, she would nuke the world the first time she had PMS. He told this to a class of freshmen. The school year in question, Harass was assigned to the most experienced teacher in the building. She was set to retire at the end of the year. Coupled with her no-nonsense attitude, the powers that be thought she could keep him in line. It took 3 weeks, and she threatened to quit if Harass was not moved out of her classroom. Fearful of losing another teacher at the start of a chaotic year, Harass was assigned to me as my support teacher. I found out when he walked into my room, announced that we could be buddies now, and made a crude joke about how he could domesticate me now. I immediately left the school, sick, and called my principal about the matter. He informed me, in no uncertain terms, that I could not refuse to work with someone just because that person made me uncomfortable. I reminded him of the previous complaints I had made. He snapped at me a bit, telling me he could not believe what an unprofessional child I was being. I was told to come up with a legitimate reason Harass shouldn't be in my class or shut my mouth and make it work. After hanging up the phone, the malicious compliance began. You see, I did have a legitimate reason. Because of a health issue I have had for my entire life, enduring extended periods of stress and anxiety can kill me. I even carry medicine with me to lower my heart rate, just in case. Step 1 was to call my doctor, who brought me in the very next day after I explained what was going on. She took my blood pressure, faxed a medical letter to my school immediately, and signed me out of work for 6 weeks, since I had 6 weeks of leave earned at this point. Step 2 was to literally stop. Usually, when a teacher goes out, lessons are pulled from other members of the school who teach the same content. Unfortunately for them, I was the only person in my building teaching dual credit. A few phone calls by my principal to the surround schools taught him what I already knew. I was the only person teaching these courses out of 11 high schools. There were no lessons to be found. I'm not sure what they gave my students to do during that time, but it surely wasn't the correct work. Step 3 was to let 2 or 3 of the parents know what was going on. I never directly told them, but a friend of a cousin of a neighbor might have heard about my health issues and passed the information along. Here's the point in the story when you think I'm about to tell you I enjoyed my 6-week paid vacation and went back to work, right? Oh no, the malicious compliance continues. A week before I am scheduled to return to work, my principal calls me up. Standard well wishes about my health are extended, after which he says that he hopes the weeks away from the building have cleared my mind and helps me realize how hysterical I was acting. He continued by telling me that regardless of my feelings, I would continue to have Harass as a support teacher. I asked him if he was ready to lose a teacher over this, and he laughed and hung up. Knowing that this was probably going to happen, I already had a doctor's appointment set up for phase 2. Because my health issue is explicitly and clearly covered by the ADA, my doctor issued me reasonable accommodation paperwork to give our. Essentially, I was to be allowed to teach in the least stressful environment possible, as determined by myself and my supervisor, along with a doctor's note restricting me to teaching duties that could be performed at home, because of the excessive stress currently in the building. Like I said, we are in the year of Ebola, so virtual learning was unheard of in most places. I checked with a lawyer to make sure my contract was airtight. It was, and I delivered the paperwork to the head of HR, whose child I taught. I also contacted my college supervisor, whose child I taught, to inform her that as of Monday, I would have been absent for more than 20% of the seat time for my courses, thus rendering those credits invalid. Over the weeks, she had pieced together what was going on, despite the school refusing to communicate any information with her, and she was furious. She may have told other parents what was going on, which resulted in dozens of calls to the school within a few days. By Monday, my accommodations were approved. I was allowed to teach my classes virtually from my home to save the embarrassment of canceling dual credit courses, and I rode out the year at home before transferring districts at the end of the year. I never spoke to or saw Harass again. Thanks for listening.